Hey, all you Holly Weirdos. Welcome to another episode of Holly Weird Paranormal Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to take a different approach to things. I'm going to actually have a sit down with one of our most important guests to interview to date, and that is Brice Mitchell Williams. Yes, our very own co-host Brice. Brice has recently come out with his new play called Grace. Grace is a heart-wrenching play that explores the journey of personal growth through the lens of the playwright himself, Brice Mitchell Williams, who grew up with an incarcerated parent. Now, the main character of his play navigates through the complexities of their upbringing, the Christian church, grappling with feelings of abandonment and loss while striving to carve out their own identity and place in the world. And let's just say in this interview, you'll definitely learn a different side of Brice that he is willing to share and be very open to. There are many different types of topics that we'll definitely touch in this interview, such as religious trauma and the impact of having a loved one within the criminal justice system, along with the perception of victimization of victims in crimes and the impact of legal decisions on victims. We definitely don't hold back anything in this interview, and it's definitely dedicated to those who are going through a struggle like this of having a parent who has been or is currently incarcerated. So there's no necessary drills in this episode besides possibly grabbing some tissues and maybe your soapbox to get on top of it so you can do your rants with Brice as we get Holly Weird with Brice Mitchell Williams and his Grace. Let's get Holly Weird with Brice. Hey, all you Holly Weirdos. This episode contains content that may be alarming to some listeners. Please note that this episode features themes of descriptions of sexual assault, desires, and themes which may be triggering. Listener discretion is advised. This episode also focuses on family members who are currently or have been incarcerated. And if you or someone you know who's currently going through this situation, there are support groups out there, such as PFA, Prison Families Alliance. And you can find them at prisonfamiliesalliance.org. PFA offers a variety of programs for adults and children who have loved ones in the criminal justice system. They offer free monthly peer support meetings, both in person and virtual, workshops, and education series to help families navigate the criminal justice system. Once again, you can head on over to prisonfamiliesalliance.org. And if you're based in and around the Los Angeles area and want to support Brice and watch his show, Grace, which is coming up pretty soon, you can do so by purchasing your tickets at fireflytheatergroup.com. There'll be 2 weekends of this performance running, one during June the 7th through the 9th, and the second weekend being June the 14th through the 16th. Now let's get Holly Weird. Hello, friends. Hello, all your weirdos.
Hello.
We decided, well, me personally, I wanted to actually dedicate this entire episode to the one and only Brice Mitchell Williams.
Everyone signs off immediately. They're like, no, we're not doing that.
Let's get deep inside Brice, like really deep.
Normally you have to buy me breakfast first, but I'll do it.
Right. From what spot would you like?
Oh, God.
If there's a Cracker Barrel, then might as well.
There's a Cracker Barrel, yes. There's a lot for Cracker Barrel.
Oh, my God. To have a Cracker Barrel here in Los Angeles would be a dream.
The nearest one is in,
where is it?
Halfway between here and Vegas, I'm pretty sure.
Right? Isn't it close to Victorville or something, or a little bit outside?
Yeah, it's out there. So it's possible, but it's a journey.
Yeah, it is a journey. Just like going to Olive Garden is a journey here.
Yes, it is.
So it is.
So good.
So I wanted to dedicate this episode to Brice because Brice wrote a show and it is based on his life and all of the challenges and trials and tribulations and also successes and discoveries. So there's a lot of tough subject subject matters in this one particular show. You in particular have mentioned this, I guess, like time to time or hinted that you are actually a child of a parent who has been incarcerated.
Yes.
And, you know, we do touch on true crime on this podcast, but we really don't really touch on the deeper subjects as this one. And to anyone out there that has gone through the situation or is currently going through the situation, then this episode is also dedicated to you. And I guess, Brice, just take it away with Grace us your show and what it's been like growing up with a parent that's been in prison.
Yeah. So, I know, yeah. So a lot of things to unpack. Yeah, I'll just start with the show, and then we can kind of, you know, anything you think of, or as we go, we can definitely talk about.
Absolutely.
So I moved to Los Angeles in 2009, 2010. I had graduated from university in Indiana. I was like a 4+1 semester super senior, basically. So I graduated and then applied to acting school basically the year after I graduated, because for many reasons I was like, I can't live in Indiana for the rest of my life. Like, I just can't do this.
Of course.
So the reason I bring all of that up is, you know, the acting program was a 3-year program. And as I've mentioned several times before, I worked on, that's how I know you, was through working on tech departments and things like that for the plays. And one of the like really incredible parts of that little school is, and that you don't realize is not the norm when you're a student there, is that you are experiencing the highest caliber of show that you will for years, because they're functioning with full departments, full tech, full audience participation, full rehearsal without interruption. So it really is, look, all institutions, as we've talked about, they all have their pros and their cons, frankly. But with that experience, getting to work so closely with fully produced shows and incredible works that you cannot get the rights to unless you're like an education institution, frankly. It was just like this very inspiring experience in terms of like what is possible in the world of theater. And so this is like 2000 and I don't know, when did you start working there? Like 2000 and
I'm going to say it was 2013. Yeah, 2013-ish. Yeah.
So
actually, July of 2013.
Okay. So around that time when I was doing like the tech, like with the lighting and all of that, they did a beautiful show, called Tracers, which is this really beautiful play. I really promise there's a point to all of this. I was like, I'm not going to ramble this episode.
I remember Tracers, yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, it was directed by Judith Bohannon, rest in power. Really, she was such a, like, force to be reckoned with in that production. And it's a beautiful play because the way that it was written, they collected a bunch of veterans from the Vietnam War, and they took them to this retreat. I believe it was in Arizona, and they just had them workshop and write their experiences. And then the writer of the play, he kind of collected those things and created a narrative and a play. And it was really beautiful and heartbreaking and funny. There's humor and joy in it as well. And I remember experiencing that play, and so many of the scenes, I've never been to war. I certainly have never served, but so many of the scenes resonated because there was something that happened specifically, I think to all veterans, but specifically to veterans who then in the modern era come home, and because I want to be careful not to be like too political, but because there's so many problems with the way that we go to war in a modern era, veterans come home and we as a country are quite bad, frankly, at taking care of them. And
100%
so
agreed.
they're sort of the only people that get their experience is other soldiers and veterans. And I think that I cannot understand what they went through, but seeing a show about that really resonated with me. And I understood that feeling because having lived in such a conservative area and then moving to such a quote unquote non-conservative city, I would tell these stories of things that at the time I thought were quite innocuous and like, oh, this is just like how it was in Indiana. And people would look at me and just be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's crazy. And I'm like, oh, is it? Is that crazy? So it was this very interesting experience where as I started to realize that people who had religious trauma, people who had moved from those cities or places to cities, they get the shorthand, they have the experience. And so again, I would never try and like compare my experience to that of anyone who has served. I want to be very clear about that. But the framework of the play really inspired me is really the point of all of that. And so I started in like 2013 or so. I just started writing basically what would become the first draft of this play. And it was sort of just like any scene that popped into my head, I would write it down. And so I ended up with like a stack of like 400 pages basically of just like memories, frankly, of my time there, of my experiences. So just for some like historical context, sorry, I know I'm kind of meandering, but at the time when I was in Indiana, that was when, for context, Mike Pence was governor for a portion of that. He helped at the time destabilize and defund much of the aid that was available to the homosexual and queer communities. And so there actually was like quite a bad AIDS epidemic in Indianapolis because there was no funding because he had defunded that for religious reasons. The president of our school at the time, he and Hobby Lobby, if you recall, and Mike Pence at the time, they were instrumental on getting the Hobby Lobby bills rolling and passed to sort of defund healthcare based on abortion and the autonomy of people's bodies and their false, frankly, claims that as religious institutions, they shouldn't have to be, quote unquote, forced to pay for murder. Again, those are their words. I deeply could not agree with that less. But so this is the environment that I was in school in. But at the time, it did not feel odd or oppressive or weird. And I, then as a closeted queer person in that environment, it was very tricky to navigate being able to slowly come out of the closet, and also knowing that if that had been discovered or public knowledge or told to the wrong people, that I would have been kicked out of school. And there were several people who were kicked out while I was a student at Grace. You sign a covenant, affirming that you will uphold not just like all legal institutional laws, but like everything that Grace decides is like part of their code of conduct. You sign that you will affirm those things. You have to sign that you are a believer in Jesus Christ and that you have a personal faith with him. So there's all these like things that are extra because it was a religious liberal arts school. Like I have a degree, like it's a accredited quote unquote real degree. All of that to say, long story long, that is sort of the crucible that this show, which is also titled Grace. So I'm really looking forward to like the cease and desist letter from the university. That is sort of the experience that I don't really know how to transition that fully, but there basically when I was a junior, like a sophomore junior, my dad was incarcerated in 2000 and I believe it was like 7 or 8. I don't remember fully. I blocked a lot. Unfortunately, he used to be a minister and he was the head minister of a church in a very small town, like one county over from us. And he assaulted and raped a minor. And the age of consent in Ohio at the time was, I believe, 16. And he raped a 15-year-old that was a member of the church and was going to him for counseling. And so he was tried and convicted approximately a year later. And then he was charged with, if I'm remembering correctly, 2 counts of, is like either aggravated sexual battery or sexual assault. I don't remember the exact terminology. Again, I blocked like a lot of this out, so like I have to like kind of remind myself.
Because it seemed like you compartmentalized.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Tremendous amount, yeah.
And he, so a lot of what I want to talk about in terms of being a child of someone who has been incarcerated, and a lot of what I talk about in this play, is the ripples of a singular event. They have reaching effects that, of course, we cannot know the how far that will go, but that has been the strangest thing to witness, is that this one singular person who did something quite egregious, quite horrifying, has had such a negative effect on things that have reached a level that I find, like, frankly baffling. But I think that just goes to show that, like, you just don't know. And so, yeah, I don't know, be a good person. Like, I know that sounds quite trite, but so he was arrested. Many people came to his defense, and I will say that I think at the time that was in an effort to support our family and their memory of my father. We had switched, we did something we called it church planting, and basically a larger church will send members from the larger church to a smaller community and create like an offshoot, but it's the same denomination, it's the same church. So that was what he was in the process of heading up at the time. So we would come from, like, we lived in the middle, one county that is like to the east of us was our original church, and then one county to the west of us was where they sent this like offshoot church where he was a minister when he was arrested. And what ended up happening is that because we were no longer a part of that larger church, but we had grown up there. We moved there, I think, when I was like 1. So we'd been our entire lives. My sister was born there. We had been a part of that community for 18 years at that point, 17 or 20 years, basically. And those people remembered all of the good things they remembered about him from that time. And so they wrote a huge letter writing campaign, talking about his virtue and how he couldn't have possibly done this, and how the judge should be lenient, and how this was an anomaly and like he wouldn't normally do these things. And even at the time, because we already knew that it was true, he had sort of already confessed that, but that wasn't very public knowledge. And so there was this very strange dichotomy where there's the victim, the actual victim, and she is a minor, was a minor at the time. And so the reporting on that was very tenuous at best, because it's this very small town. They didn't release her name. She, wasn't required to testify. So there was a lot of vacuum for people to insert their own opinion about what had happened based on just their memory of him. And the reason I bring all of that up is because then as our family was victimized, not in the same way, not on the same level, but what ended up happening is that we knew the truth. Here's this person that I certainly do not know. Like, I can't imagine this person being capable of doing that, but he did do it. And then there's these people who used to be quite important to us from having grown up with them our entire lives being like, there's no way he could have done it. She was asking when, and it was this very strange, like, in many ways, the very first steps of like my personal deconstruction, because I was like, well, that's not showing a lot of like grace. First of all, she is a victim. And his whole sort of thing was like, well, she had attempted to entrap other ministers in the area. She was a very disturbed individual. And the only reason I bring that up, I want to be very, very clear. He absolutely did do it. She absolutely was a minor. Children cannot give consent. And also she had mental instability that I think contributed. So she had been kicked out of several churches for attempting to sleep with ministers at other churches. And he was just the only one deplorable enough and stupid enough, frankly, to actually participate in that, as opposed to reporting her or kicking her out of the church or ceasing conversation with her, because he's an idiot and a criminal and a pedophile. Like, fill in the blank. Whatever you want to call him is fine. So, that was a very strange experience. The judge in the trial, whose name I cannot remember, it actually had quite the opposite effect. And I will say, to this judge's credit, I don't think that people who behave well 99% of the time should get a pass for the 1% when they do something that hurts other people so egregiously. Now, of course, there are truly instances that are accidents or out of character, or all of those things are true, but they don't absolve you. And so what ended up happening is that all of these people were writing asking for leniency because he was a, quote, good person in the community. Mm-hmm. And the judge, in fact, went the opposite way. So he was charged with 2 counts with a maximum sentence of 4 or 5 years each. And he ruled that those would need to be served consecutively, not concurrently. So it doubled the length of time that he was going to be in prison, from 4 to 5 years to automatically minimum 8 years. I don't know if he had the chance for parole. I don't know if he had time off for good behavior. And I remember at the time I was 21 or 22, maybe. And I remember thinking, by the time he gets out, I will be completely out of my 20s. That's my whole life, which at the time did feel very true. And now is, like, frankly, quite laughable. Like, oh, babe, no, you're fine. Like, you're going to be 31. It's not a big deal. But at the time, it did feel just very like, well, this person will be missing my entire life and has done something so heinous. And like, all right, see you never. So that's sort of my experience with the initial penal system and the, being a member of a family of someone who is a criminal and is a sexual deviant, and who you then have to question, like, well, I grew up like with friends who were women. Like, were any of them ever in danger? Were any of them ever unsafe being around this person who is a predator and who has assaulted someone? So,
especially someone who is, a huge member and leader of a church.
Right. And at the larger church, he was the youth pastor. And then at the new church, he was the head pastor, because there was only one pastor. But like, he was in charge of the youth group for decades, and we were on missions trips and overnights and traveling internationally. Like, there's so many problems, and there were some checks and balances, but frankly not enough. And so that was sort of the initial experience. And then basically what happened is that this victim, she turned 18, I believe. I mean, she did. Obviously, she's still around. But I don't remember if it's because she became an adult in Ohio, or the statute ran up or something. But she basically, and this is where it starts getting like, you just don't know how far the ripples of your crime will go. And so she, I just want to be very careful about how I'm speaking about this. So if at any point in this episode, it comes across like I am not appalled or think that she's the victim or any of those things, please know that like she was a child and children cannot give consent, and everything else after that is irrelevant because like that is true. So she then, there was a civil suit, you know, outside of the criminal case. And she actually, I don't remember exactly, but she sued the larger church that we had come from. Oh, wow. And she basically attested now, and we now know correctly so. Whatever her motivations were, I certainly can't speak on that, but she attested that the larger church had not done their due diligence in weeding out a predator, that they had in fact protected a predator for years, and that because they did not do their due diligence, that enabled her assault. And there's a lot to unpack there, but ultimately that is essentially the case. There was a member of that larger church. He was the counseling pastor, I believe. He and my father had several conversations where my dad expressed a struggle with feeling attracted to minors, to women who were under the legal age. And that pastor did not report him. That pastor kept that secret. That pastor allegedly was counseling him on those things. And the two of them were not transparent and open with the head pastor of this larger church. So something that happened is, in this case, the head pastor, who had left to go be a dean at the school at Grace, where I went to, he left the church and went to it's all very interconnected, is the sort of weird part. He had come and was being asked to testify in this trial about like, how could this church cover up for him? And he was like, we weren't. That absolutely was not happening. And he found out under oath on trial that, yes, that was happening. You were also being lied to. You also did not know that these two were doing something quite insidious, frankly. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first one. And a lot of people from that church has sort of, you know, they were in a civil suit. That civil suit, she did win something, but that church has really never recovered in many ways. And the smaller church does not really exist in that same way either. So that's the first, like, the victim is absolutely the first person. Her life is altered irrevocably forever. That will always have happened to her. Mm-hmm. The second sort of tier, I guess, is our lives, of course. Like, this was not, you know, this pillar, this foundation of our family did something so out of what we were told was right. What we were told, you know, when you're being told that, like, if you lie, like, that's a sin and you're going to hell. Okay, well, I've never raped a minor, so, like, I guess I'm doing okay. You know what I mean? Like, fuck you. Right. So when that happens, it sort of upends your whole world, of course. And then the third tier was sort of like the churches themselves. And obviously, like, I have a lot of opinions. If you've ever listened to an episode, you know that I have a lot of opinions about many rants. Yes. About organized religion and whether it's doing any good or not. These churches, whether they were doing good, they certainly were. They do not currently have the influence that they had in sort of like the 90s, early 2000s. And part of that is because of, yes, the decline in organized religion in this country, thankfully, but also part of it is this very specific thing. Like, oh, here's another church protecting a pedophile. Like, what the fuck? So that case then escalates to essentially the Ohio Supreme Court. And basically what happens is there is frankly, a quite sinister underbelly in the legal system that victim blames, that slut shames, that blames victims for being opportunistic. And uses those things in juries and in the legal system to sort of paint this picture of like, well, here are people who are trying to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
And they're using the legal system to do that. Do I think that that is possible? Of course. There are examples where people try and do things, and that's fine. What I will vehemently push back on is that if the person has had to go through an attack, an assault, a crime, where they are a victim in order to make a quick buck, then they've certainly paid their dues. Now it's an issue of they need to be paid their wages. I don't work for free. I don't think victims should be victimized, period. But they certainly should then be allowed to pursue the fullest extent of the law, including monetary ramifications, if that unfortunate experience is put upon them. You know,
right.
A victim doesn't ask to be victimized. And so in this
That's so
case,
true.
That sort of general mind of like, oh, here's this young woman now. She's an adult, and she, again, please hear this. This is just sort of the perception. This is not how I feel about her personally. I don't know her. I've never spoken to her after this. I've never seen her after this. But she comes from a more rural and poor part of the county. She lives in a lower income housing area. Her family is stereotypically what you would picture in a non-working or needing government assistance type of way. And I think when you start pairing those things, it's very easy to say, oh, they just want to make a quick buck. Oh, her father is involved. He's just looking for a payout. Oh, they're poor. They just want to like screw the system and make some money. They don't want to work anymore. Oh, they're, fill in the blank. And so I think that was used. And basically the case that went to the Ohio Supreme Court was that there should be, that the state asserted that there should be a limitation, and the church asserted that there should be a limitation on how much funding and how much reparation victims should be given and awarded, even if they win their cases. And so this is why I know I'm rambling, but this is why I bring that up. So now here we are, this singular person, one day in 2008, decided to commit a crime against a minor. And now, several years later, the Ohio Supreme Court rules that victims of assault, rape, grooming, child trafficking, like fill in the blank, by organized religions, now they have a cap on how much damages they are able to receive in the state of Ohio because of this one case, because of this one person. And again, it's that thing where people say, well, what if someone's lying? What if someone is like, I would rather every single person, on the off chance that 1% of them are lying. I don't care. Let them get away with that. Let them deal with God in that. If that's what they think they need to do to make a buck, I don't give a fuck. Because the 99% of people who have been victimized, who are telling the truth, are just trying to put the pieces of their life back together. And because of this man's existence, the state now has decided, like, your trauma is only worth like $15,000. Like, yeah, it's mind blowing. I don't have kids, but the children in my life who I'm very fond of, who I care about, I would murder someone over these kinds of issues. Like, I would go to the mat for these kinds of issues. I can't imagine the state being like, sorry, we know your child was victimized by organized religion, the place where they're supposed to be the safest. We're not even going to award you an amount that like can set them up to go to school, or like to pay for their housing, or to like get them in therapy for longer than basically a year. That is really fucking tough to swallow. And so, that's sort of his legacy, and whether he is able to acknowledge those things or not is like kind of irrelevant. Like, that is the mark on this world that you have left. Your actions have created a system that I find disgusting and deplorable. And fine, you were one person and you made a mistake. And, you know, lots of people talk about like, well, how long does someone have to pay for their mistakes? But there's a precedent that will affect an untold number of people for potentially generations. And Ohio is, you know, kind of a fucking mess litigiously. They're so embroiled in heartbeat bills and gerrymandering, and as so many states are. So it's like, here's this law on the books that's just existing, and we can't even get to like maybe trying to focus on overturning that or getting that decision reversed because there's so much other shit on people's plates. Like no one can. So again, all of that to say, that's sort of my experience as a front row witness to the legal system and how quickly embroiled it gets when there are sexual crimes involved, when people are bringing gender, like obviously there are gender politics that are involved, there are age politics that are involved, there's religious politics that are involved. All of those things just create such like a muddled and confusing litigious problem when at its core an adult attacked a minor and admitted that he did it. Like that's very black and white to me.
Yeah.
And yet here we are.
There's even documents that he had these urges, you
right.
know?
And so it's just like a very bizarre experience. And so in my personal life, when that all was happening, in many ways, it's quite odd. And I think this is sort of the crux of the play in one sentence, is that it is very jarring when you feel grateful for the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Because for me, what happened was it gave me an out. It gave me a freedom to escape a version of my life that I was not in control of. And so because he did all of these things, at that point, it was like, well, what the fuck does any of this matter? First of all, like, this is not real. Mm-hmm. This person who has been like the moral arbiter of our lives for my entire life has done something so egregious, so heinous. I've certainly never done anything even remotely close to that. So like, he does not have the authority to sit in judgment on me. Like, no, excuse me.
Right.
And so once that little domino fell, the journey for my ability to even acknowledge that I was gay, denial is such a powerful weapon, as we all know.
Yeah.
Those things, I started being able to have true conversations with myself about like what was happening. Like, look, you can tell yourself you're not gay all you want, but like, if you don't want to act on those feelings, that's fine. But like, please at least be honest with yourself. Again, that's just me to me. Anyone on their journey, do whatever is right for you. But for me, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not gay. And then like looking at gay porn, like, what are you doing? Yes, you are. Like, it's fine. You are. But I couldn't even acknowledge. 100%. But like, I couldn't even acknowledge it. I couldn't even like I was dating a woman when he was arrested. It was quite serious. And people always say like, well, didn't you know? But you have to understand, with how religious and strict our environment was, you couldn't be in the opposite gender's rooms. You couldn't cohabitate with them. If you were caught having sex, you would be put on probation or kicked out. Like, It didn't matter if you were gay or straight. If they caught you having sex, like, you gotta go. If they caught you drinking, you're done. So people were like, well, how did you not know? You were dating a woman and like, you weren't making out. You weren't like, you didn't have sex. Like, you obviously weren't attracted to her. I was like, right, now I can see that. But at the time, it was because we were so religious. We're being so chaste. We're saving ourselves for marriage. What a perfect environment to hide from yourself. And so in many ways, it's this strange thing where I do not feel grateful. He's a bad person. He did a bad, atrocious thing, but I wouldn't change it because it gave me permission to step out of this sort of roller coaster that I was locked into. And thank God that I was able to do that, and no judgment. I think it's very difficult. Everyone's on their own journey, of course, but I think it could have been much worse. I could have left a much larger wake of destruction. I wasn't married. I didn't end up having children. We have heard many stories where people who have been in the closet come out much later in their life. And I love that beautiful journey, and I support everyone wherever they are on their journey. But it's still difficult for the children and the spouses and the people that we leave in our wakes. And sometimes we have to do those things for our own mental journeys, but we still have to acknowledge the people that we inadvertently or advertently hurt in those processes. So in many ways, I got very lucky because, she was very upset. I sort of not even really broke up with her. I'm a Gemini, and so I ghosted her like a psycho because I'm a bad person, I guess. And she was like, I don't understand what happened. Like, what? And I used the shield of like, well, I just can't date someone and process like all of these things.
All this stuff is going on.
My family. Yeah. And she was like, but I want to like be there for you. But in my head, I was like, yeah, sorry, I'm gay. I don't know. So I don't feel great about that. She's very happy. I wish her well. She has a beautiful family, and like, it worked out the way that it was supposed to, but it's also, I've always said it's why I was able to move to Los Angeles in the first place, because once you've gone through something so not just difficult, it was difficult, but it was also so unexpected. It was something that I never, if you had lined up 1 million people, he would have been the last one. And I'm like, well, not him. Like, surely not him. Now, in hindsight, there were many warning signs leading up to it and red flags and things. But now I'm like, yeah, you're a pedophile. Please don't talk about children like that. What is wrong with you?
Would he do things like that? Would he like, just like even a little before, way before this ever happened? Were there signs, or were there like, hey, that didn't sound right, but you're my dad. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, but I only now, at the time, would not have ever known that those were the things. And part of that is like culturally, we were having very different kinds of conversations. Mm-hmm. The terminology that was being used. So that is like 2024 goggles looking backward. But yeah, there were a lot of signs. Like just in general, like one time, this is so dumb. One time we were at a show choir competition and a rival school who shall remain nameless because I don't remember them and we hated them. They were doing a number, and show choir, it's like, it's even more heightened than musical theater dancing. Like, it's the most ridiculous, like absurd, sparkly, big hair, poofy dresses. Like, it's just it's even crazier than like what they showed on Glee. Like, it truly is insane. At that level, we were in the competitive show choir world. And there was this one young woman, and she was, in the front row. And obviously the people in the front row are traditionally the best performers. And she was you could not keep your eyes off her. I remember that as well. And this was like a couple weeks before he assaulted his victim and was arrested. And I remember we were in the audience. My sister was performing. This was a separate school, so she was backstage somewhere, I guess. So here's this young person dancing. She's probably between 16 and 18 or so, like maybe a senior in high school, anywhere. She was like probably a junior or a senior. And she's really charismatic, and she's really feeling the choreography. And he just sort of innocuously said, like, oh, wow, like some people, like some girls really like dancing like sexy. Like she really has to throw her like boobs into it. And I remember even at the time being like, what are you talking about? Like, no, she's not. She's dancing. And even if like at one point they were like on this like scaffolding that they had built, and they were like all swaying, and like, it doesn't matter. That's still a child. Like, why does your brain look at her, for example, and think like, oh, this choreography that she's doing, not only do I find that sexual, but I'm going to like comment and like slut shame her and like make her an object because that's happening. You're not well. That's not a normal thing to do. Like, it's that thing with those like children's dance things, and people are like, well, it's like too sexy. I'm like, I want to be very clear. Like, children dancing, the thing that is sexualizing them is not the dancing, it's the people that watch it and assign sexuality to the actions of a minor. I'm not attracted to children. Therefore, I do not view their actions as sexual because they are children. They are not sexual creatures. They are minors. It is adults with perversion that assign sexuality to that and then like use it for their own. I don't know. I've gone off on a tangent. My only point is, yes, there were red flags, but I just, at the time, I just didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's weird. I don't know why he said that. But yeah, there's always signs. There's always ways to tell. Again, it was hindsight, but the reason that he was convicted and caught for being an assaulter of a minor was because he was attracted to minors. Like, those two things they're linked in my mind. So it's just, I don't know. I sort of lost the thread a little bit, but it just is kind of what it is.
Yes. I mean, did you ever feel, like his crimes and incarceration, like, just punished you in a way?
For myself, no. Yes, that version of myself that had existed before all of this happened, that person died, essentially. In many ways, I grieved him as if, not myself, like my father. In many ways, I grieved him as if he had died, because that person doesn't exist anymore and stopped existing when he did this heinous crime. And yeah, that version of myself also died. I think, again, I don't believe in regret, because if you like yourself and the path that led you here, you can't change anything. Again, I would not have moved to Los Angeles. Like, I'd already gone through the worst thing that had ever happened. So I was like, well, whatever, I can go to Los Angeles. Like, that's cake. It made me self-sufficient and bold in a way. It infantilized me in a lot of other ways, like the way that I relate to people, the way that my attachment styles have manifested, my relationships, those all were severely infantilized and regressed because of this. But my self-sufficiency and my reliance on myself and my ability to do difficult things, that all came into like very sharp focus. So, therapy is great. Really recommend it.
Yes.
Could not recommend it enough. But yeah, I think the harder one, and obviously I'm protective as an older sibling. I think my sister was really punished quite a bit more. I had the privilege, I guess. I had the privilege of being about 4.5 hours away. And it was still a very insular community. So the word did still get out, but it wasn't the same. I was also in my 20s. She was in high school still. She was living in the town where it happened. So I think it was much more difficult for her because she could not escape the immediacy of it, the closeness. And, fathers and daughters, I think, are always a very unique relationship. I think they were very similar to each other in a lot of ways and really related to each other in a lot of ways, very closely. So I think it was really difficult. I think she really bore the brunt. And, we knew, she's like, it just sucks because one of the things was, he probably won't get to go to my wedding. And he probably won't be able to, go to my graduation or, walk me down the aisle. But again, it's, a two-edged sword, because what we really meant was, that version of the person that we would want there, he no longer exists. So he will not be there even once he did get out. And, that's sort of the thing now. He's out. He served his time and he's been released and I think is on probation and all of those things. But the person that is now walking around, I don't know that person. He's not a good person. He's not someone that I really want to like have around or would want to be around my friends or my family or in my life in any way. And again, I have the luxury of being across the country.
Yeah.
So I think it's tougher for her in general because she's still
there in the same.
Still there, and
yeah,
you know.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah,
I remember like always asking if you're going to go home for the holidays, and there are times where you didn't, and I never truly understood why. But now I see why. And whenever you would go, it was specifically to be with your sister too.
Yeah. So family is like what you create, I think is true of everybody, but especially queer people and children of, you know, your family can betray you. Your family can hurt you in a way that just because they're blood doesn't really like absolve them. So yeah, like when I speak of my family, I really do mean like my sister and the people out here that I've like cultivated into family. Those people, you know, my parents gave birth to me. So like, great, thanks, appreciate that, glad to be alive. But, you know, I think once you realize that you don't have to give people in your family passes to treat you poorly just because they're family, that if you would not accept the behavior that they are exhibiting towards you from anyone else, then you certainly don't have to accept it from your family. And that's very difficult. You know, we just experienced Mother's Day. Father's Day is coming up. It is always a weird time of the year for me. But those people are not able to treat me in a way that I would accept from anyone else. So like they don't get to be a part. Like, you didn't help me bake the bread, like you don't get to eat the bread. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is interesting. I have seen him multiple times for various reasons since he's been released. There's a really fascinating episode of This American Life with Lisa Ling. Can't recommend it enough. It's a great show. She's incredible. She does such a great job of not only discovering these weird little niche parts of this massive country we live in, but she also humanizes them in a way that gets them to be very vulnerable and open up to her. And there's an episode on people who are sex offenders in the justice system and what that's like for them when they're incarcerated, what's that like for them when they're released. And it is very accurate. It is a really incredible portrayal. The people that she interviews, they are, again, it's hard to sort of like decide when it's like, when is it okay to break the law in regards to a minor? Well, the answer to that is like never. But if you get caught for like public indecency near a park or a playground, you could be charged as a sex criminal and have to register for the rest of your life. So it can be very tricky. Again, I don't ever want to seem like I'm defending people who perpetrate crimes against minors. There are laws for a reason to protect them, so don't do those things. Quite simple. But I understand that there's nuance. And so those are the sort of situations that she's interviewing on this episode. And basically what happens is during the episode, they take this man who has been out for like a matter of hours that they've been interviewing in prison, and then he gets released, and they take him to a beach and film him. And he, because of that, he actually gets re-incarcerated because it's a violation of his parole to be somewhere that children could be present. And they filmed him, they attested for him, they like went to trial to try and like fix their mistake that the show did, but he still had to go back to prison. And a very similar situation happened to my dad. He broke parole, and there's a very, again, rightfully so, there's almost no leniency for sex offenders once you're out. So even though you are out of the system, you're not incarcerated, the ways, the jobs that you can have, the places that you can live, the where you can go is severely, severely limited. So, and again, rightfully so, you shouldn't have done those things. So it's just very interesting now as an adult people always ask, like, well, what about forgiveness? And like, I cannot have this person, because there's such a high possibility that he will be reincarcerated or will re-victimize someone or there's just so many things that are just like chaos that I cannot participate in or have near me. So again, it's just these long-term consequences that you don't maybe fully understand at the time, but that's now his life. He can never do the thing that he was doing before. He can't live certain places. He can't go to certain states. Like, this is just his new normal, but.
How there is a stigma attached to having like a loved one in prison that makes it difficult to talk about openly. Has it been very difficult in the very beginning to talk about it with others compared to now? Or
yes, yes. In the beginning, especially. Now, it's obviously, it's been quite a long time. This happened almost 20 years ago. So at the time, yes, it was very difficult. I felt like in the process of spinning the plate of my sexuality and trying to keep that in the closet, which has been, related akin to a psychological trauma similar to PTSD. It affects people in a similar way.
Oh, yeah.
That's why coming out of the closet is like great that you're able to do those things. But when people are not able to, it's like they deserve even more, if not equal, of our support and our empathy, because there's a trauma that's happening that prevents you from being able to do that, or any number of things. In a perfect world, people would not have to come out ever. It would just be so, and I think we're getting better about that, thank God. A friend's 12-year-old recently asked them, they didn't understand what it meant to come out. They're like, I don't understand. Like, why would people have to come out of the closet? We live in California, so it's very different. But that really was such a lovely experience for me, because I had such a traumatic experience to try and come out. And it took me such a long time. And it was so gradual and incremental and difficult. So for this child to be like, why would anyone do that? Like, just be gay. I'm like, oh, you don't understand. Like, great, good. You shouldn't have to. So while trying to juggle and spin that plate, it was a sort of second kind of secret to keep in the closet of like, I don't want anyone to know about this. I didn't do anything, but it's sort of gross by association. I still feel it. There are times where, I have friends with children, and I worry that they would not want me to be around their children because, like, well, what if it's genetic? What if he does what his dad did? No one has ever said anything like that to me. I certainly do not struggle with that. Like, I'm not attracted to children. So I don't know how to talk about that without sounding like crazy, but you do just worry. It's like, how damaging is this thing that I did not do, but it still marks you. It still becomes this sort of scarlet letter that you're trying to hide. And again, like, I was trying to keep it under wraps, and the very few people who knew about it at my school, I basically like threatened them under like pain of death. Like, if you ever talk about this, if I ever hear you talking about this to someone, I'll kill you. Like, I'll just straight up kill you. And the institution kind of knew, because I was failing out of school. And so they were like, just pass him. Like, it's fine. Just, who cares? He has like 3 more classes left. Just fucking pass him. They would not have done that if they had not like known the situation or like known our family. My dad was alum there. He had gotten his master's there, the dean of the seminary. He was the old pastor there. So a lot of nepotism, a lot of like, greasing the wheels was done for me, because people did feel bad. But yeah, you always worry, and it becomes easier to talk about. Like, again, I've written a whole fucking play about it, so come see the show. But yeah, especially at the beginning, for years, I couldn't talk about it and didn't want to talk about it. Now I feel, the only thing I feel about it now is that anytime I like start a new relationship, or when I started with my current therapist, I'm always just like, sorry, the first date, first session, it's just going to be weird. I just got to like get through a lot. I got to book it. So I just need to rip the Band-Aid off. Here's all these things that happened. Deal with it or don't. I don't care. And I especially like, a therapist, they're trained to deal with it. So he just very sweetly was like, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. But I just need to give people like a lay of the land so that we can get to the like I don't think about it or it doesn't like haunt me every day.
Yeah.
But there are things that are 100% current difficulties that are a result. Like, I mentioned, like, I think my attachment style in relationships absolutely comes from the feeling of abandonment from the person who's supposed to like literally not abandon you, who's literally supposed to love you unconditionally. We all have daddy issues. I'm only attracted to older men. Like, I'm like a therapist dream client. Like, it's so easy. I already know what's happening. Like, yeah, it's fine.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, it's great.
So they say.
Yeah, I know now. I just am like, okay, look, I gotta like just put it all out there. And it is funny. Sometimes on like first dates, I'll see people and they're just like, that's a lot. I'm like, yeah, it is a lot. But everyone has their. It didn't seem like a lot to me because it was my life and it is my life. And it has been very funny, in a lot of ways. This play is just like shadow work and just like trauma processing. So it's been really lovely in that way, but it is funny to see the cast and they'll kind of be like, did this really happen? I'm like, yes, it did. Yes, it did really happen. And they kind of like,
and it happens to other people. I mean, we've seen it time and time again, especially here in Hollywood, you know, with the Weinstein cases. But also, we just saw it recently, too, because we have a branch of this church, the Hillsong Church. I think we have a branch of it here in downtown.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I have a lot of opinions about them.
Oh, yeah. So if anyone has ever seen those documentaries, I mean, this is a really good example.
My sister walked down the aisle to a Hillsong song like that. Oh my God. Yeah. They were so ingrained. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're very ingrained. And I mean, there are still a lot of, to this very day, Brian Houston is still like in the courts, concealing his dad's sexual offenses. I mean, this is if you ever have a chance to see those documentaries of Hillsong Church, I highly recommend that you do to really get a good grasp of organized religion and the great depths that these institutions go as far as protecting their own. Organized religion protects only organized religions.
Yeah.
No one else. Everyone else is just, a victim, and dispensable. And
that's the thing that's been very interesting now as I'm not really religious anymore. I still have a sort of spirituality, but I'm questioning and open, but deconstructed, deeply deconstructed. And one of the things that's very funny is that there is especially American evangelicalism, it's different than Catholicism. So in Catholicism, there is a hierarchy and God is at the top and then the Pope is his number 2. And then it disseminates down from there. But there is a chain of command. And for many of the more evangelical sects of Christianity in this country, in Western culture, I guess you could say, there is not a centralized figurehead. There is not a pope. There is not a person who speaks for God. And the reason for that is because, American or evangelicalism in general believes that the Holy Spirit is able to speak to us directly through the Word of God, or some people believe through his voice still. That's a different conversation probably, but there isn't a need for a centralized person telling you what God says, because you can experience that for yourself through a personal relationship. The reason I bring all of that up is not to proselytize, but to explain that each individual church is basically functioning in many ways like a cult, like a sect of their own cult. There is no oversight. There is no higher authority checking in to make sure that they're upholding the tenets of the faith. I think a year or two ago, a list from the Southern Baptist Coalition, which is the largest sect of Baptists, which is one of the largest sects of Western evangelicalism, released the list of approximately 700 people who worked in those organizations who the church actively knew and was covering their crimes, their sexual crimes against minors in their congregations. And that was just a couple years ago. So it's very easy, especially as white American evangelicals, to be like, well, that's like a Catholic problem, or that doesn't happen here, or that wouldn't happen in my church is the biggest one. That wouldn't happen here. And I just want to, among other things, it is in your church. It is happening in your church. It is. It's the whole culture. It's every single church. If you are, and I'm not trying to call anyone out, I truly am trying to call people in, because it's the whole culture. It's being told when you're 9 years old that your shorts are too short and you better watch out because you're going to tempt the boys.
Oh, God,
as a 9-year-old. Like, what the fuck? Why are people telling my sister, oh, that tank top you're wearing, it's too revealing. Like, you're going to, like, there's going to be men in the church that you need to, like, be careful of.
Mm-hmm.
Kick them out. Why are you telling her? And that's just the few examples that I can kind of remember. And I was lucky enough to not be a young girl or woman in that environment. Mm-hmm. I had the privilege of being a man and of being white and of being the son of a minister. Yeah, I was gay, so I wasn't fully seated at the table, but that is such a low thing that I was hiding anyway. And so it's just this very, like, people still now, they'll very much be like, well, wow, I can't believe that happened. But that wouldn't happen at our church. I'm here to tell you that I've been to a lot of churches. I've done missions work in dozens of countries, in dozens of states. I was very much, I talk now and I'm sure people are like, this heathen, like, whoa, I can't explain to you how good of a Christian I was. I was the poster child. I was all in. I was in every conference, every missions organization, everything. At one point, I was sort of shortlisted by an organization as, like, essentially like a 30 under 30, but for, like, young evangelical youth. Like, this is the future of the church in America. And I was on that list. Like, I cannot explain to people. So when they kind of start to say, like, well, you've deconstructed, so you don't know what, like, faith is. Like, I'm going to stop you right there. Like, I studied, I was involved, I had drank all of the Kool-Aid. Like, I know what I'm talking about. And my experience is vast, probably more vast than the majority of people. And again, I'm going to be very clear that I'm not trying to shame people or call them out. But, like, truly, what do we think the verse is referring to? Get the log out of your eye before you remove the speck in your brother's. Like, what do we think that's referring to if we're not, like, trying to clean up the messes in our own churches? Because I'm here to tell you it is in your church. Yeah, maybe someone has never been convicted. I pray that that's true. But the culture that surrounds many, if not every single church that I've certainly ever been to, the idea of purity culture, the idea of policing children's bodies, the theory behind waiting till marriage, the theory behind losing your virginity as if you can lose a part of yourself, celibacy and purity culture, all of those things create environments where predators thrive. And there's no oversight. No one can tell the pastors or the elders that they are not correct, that they're not allowed. There's no oversight. And especially if you're a woman, you have no authority. Again, sorry to, like, go on, like, such a tangent, but it's because
this is your episode to do all the tangents. This is the tangent episode.
It's because it's, it's my lived experience, and I'm here to tell you. Yeah, and it's like I can't explain to you how little I would have thought that my father would have been capable of this. And it's because anyone, I think, is capable of anything. But when you are a person with a sickness and you are put into an environment where you are completely without checks and balances, and that you have the authority of God on your side, that is a rife ground for abuse. I would just encourage people to take that very seriously. It's very easy. And look, most of our listeners are probably not in this boat, so I'm not trying to like harp on anyone or make anyone feel defensive, but I just know that the people that are still in my life who are still sort of in those things, I can always just sort of tell when they're like, yeah, but like that won't happen in our church. I hope I'm wrong. I truly hope I'm wrong. I have not yet been proven wrong. So take that for what it is. I never thought it would be our family. I never thought it would be my father. I could not have held him in higher esteem. He was beloved in our community. He's so charming. He's so charismatic. He is so, just every good thing. He's very handsome. Like, name it. It's all of the things that you would think, like, not that guy. It can be that person. I don't know why I'm like harping on that so much, but I just think that that's sort of like the biggest takeaway is that, much like you're talking about with the Hillsong documentary, when the environment is rife and fertile for abuse, abusers will take advantage of that. That's it.
Yeah. That is exactly what we saw in that documentary, you know, many right there. Yeah. You're like, I went through it.
Hillsong.
What else? What other? I mean, that was a really good piece of advice for anyone who has gone through that or is currently in an organized religion.
Sure.
You know, just to be aware of the people in your surroundings. But what other pieces of advice do you have for individuals whose parents are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated? Like, what can you offer them?
Look, all I can offer is my experience. And I think that's, been the most interesting part about writing this play is like, well, why would anyone care? This is like just a story that's happened to me. Like, who cares? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I'm nobody. It doesn't matter. And I think the counter to that is that it's like, right, but very personal stories actually are quite universal. The things that I'm affected by the most artistically are things that are very personal. And so I guess in my experience, I would just say the main thing is to know that even though you feel like it, you actually are not the person who committed the crime. You are not the person who is branded by this, even though it might feel like it, especially when it's your parents. I think the other one is that it's not your job to repair that person's image, their life. It's not your job to make them okay. I cannot fix that person. I'm not a therapist. Even if I were, there'd be a conflict of interest if it's a family member. So I think those, you know, and ultimately I think you just have to, whatever you have to do to heal and protect yourself, that's what you have to do. And if that means cutting them out, then that's what that means. And if they get mad at you and they lash out at you and they try and smear your name, that's about them. That's not about you. And I think that's my main takeaway is that, you know, and I'm obviously like a broken person for many reasons, but it manifests in ways, and I just have to kind of deal with those ways as they come. I really recommend a therapist for anyone. Look, this is a little controversial. It's just been my experience. I would not trust a therapist who is extremely based in religion. Often it was used against me as a way to be like, well, God has a plan and you should just be fine. Like, why aren't you praying harder? I hope that was just my experience. I would not trust a therapist who used the Bible or religion in their sessions. They really should be using like clinical psychology that they've gone to school for. That's just my personal experience. If you have a therapist who's religious that you really are getting something out of, good. That was not my experience. I want everyone to be well. I just would be, I think everyone should be in therapy.
everybody needs to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is like I would never lift myself up as like an example of like, wow.
I'm in therapy. Yeah, I mean,
you have to.
It's okay to take your meds. It's okay to have a therapist.
And I think it's that thing. You know, I would never hold myself up as an example. Like, see, I did it, and like you can too. Like, no, I still struggle, and I still am trying to put pieces back together, and it's messy. And I wrote a play about it, so I'm clearly not like over it in many ways, but I am, and it's been very weird. There are weird things like I'm closer to the age that he was when he was arrested than I am to the age that I was. So like it's been long enough since it's happened that I'm now almost his age when he was arrested. So things like that are very strange. They're very weird. Again, I think I mentioned it. It's very, very strange to feel grateful is a strange word, but like this person gave me permission to have the life that I have now by being such a bad person. So it's very strange to feel grateful for something so heinous, but I think there's a lot of truth in that. So
well, without him, we wouldn't have you, Brice. So
yeah, and I sometimes
you're
do
all
think
very
about that.
thankful
Yeah,
for your
everyone's like, oh, I'm the best. But I do think about it. I was dating a woman and I was working at a bank in Indiana, and that was a very fine life. But yeah, it was not very truthful, and I'm very grateful that I only hurt people in my journey to self-actualization as much as I did. It could have been much worse. And, I've made amends with those people, and I wish them well, and we're good, and all of those things. They're happy. They have beautiful lives and families and got the life that they want. And I am a version of myself that I'm very proud of and that I love. So those, I think, are the main takeaways. And, I put it in a play. So
where can people see this play, Brice? Where can they purchase tickets? Where is it going to be held at? How long is it running?
So, unfortunately, our theater company is very small. It is at the Sherry Theater in North Hollywood, right there on Magnolia. If you would like to buy tickets, the link is in my bio. There's several other links, donation links and things like that. But it's the Firefly Theater Group. You can go directly to fireflytheatergroup.com and order tickets there. The tickets are linked in my bio. I'll be posting about it as we get closer. We open... I'm going to go look at my calendar. We open the 7th, 8th, and 9th of June. And then we also are running that second weekend, the 14th, 15th, and 16th. So yes, just 6 shows. It's going to be very quick. I'm already a little sad. It's very funny. Theater is the most ephemeral of art forms. Like, I don't know, outside of like fire dancing, maybe. I've been writing a version of this show for 15 years. We've been talking about producing the show for 5 years. We've been finalizing the final draft for a year and a half. We've been in rehearsals for months now. And it will be over so quickly. So it is very strange to think about, like, yeah, in many ways, this is like my life story and my life work. And it will be gone in a matter of weeks. And like maybe a couple hundred people, hopefully, will see it. So yeah, it's very strange. It's very surreal and ephemeral. Yeah, please come in. I think it's good. I think it's resonated with everyone who has read it, who has experienced it. We probably will tape it. I don't know if it will be distributed. That's a conversation for a later version of myself, probably. But for now, yes, we're running the middle 2 weeks of June. My birthday is the 6th, and we open on the 7th. So it'd be a great birthday present to come see my show. Yeah,
I know. I'm going on so many trips, but I was like, no, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here. So I'm going to go see it. Like,
and it's crazy. I have like professors from my time at Grace have messaged me, and there are people that I still talk to who were at Grace at this time that have read the show that I've shared with them. There are people from Grace who are coming to see the show. It's very surreal. It's very crazy that like this thing has sort of reached as many people as it has, and hopefully will continue to do so. And I don't know. I actually think it's quite good. I don't know, not to toot my own horn, but I don't know. I'm very excited. I think it has I think it's got some legs to it. So yes, come see it. We're the cheapest ticket in Hollywood, and we serve good alcohol. So,
well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I'm honored
for being so open and just so raw. And, you know, to anyone out there that is going through the same problem, you're not alone. And please feel free to email us. Any questions that you have to Brice, you can email us at hollyweirdparanormal@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. And if you too have been, you know, a child of a parent who's been incarcerated or is currently being incarcerated, and just know that you're not alone. And we're still keeping it weird here in Hollywood, of course.
Yes,
and if you definitely have time to go see Grace, please do. Like Brice said, go and follow the link in his bio. Where can people find your bio on Instagram?
So I'm the Smirking Assassin on Instagram.
Perfect.
Or you can go to, or you can go to the Firefly Theater Group on Instagram. That's our website.
We have to talk about this because it was because at this institution we actually met each other. But I don't know if you remember us talking about the big fancy acting school in Hollywood is now closing its doors after how many
that campus is. The school itself will still exist in New York.
Oh, the campus
But the campus is
completely closing. Yeah. So we don't know what's going to be happening to those bungalows of Charlie Chaplin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how that all like occurred. Like when I got your message, I was like, no.
I know. I was mouth agape. I was like, oh my God.
And I'm wondering what's going to happen with that campus. I'm wondering who is going to take over that property, especially the dorms, like what they're going to experience. Because
look, as sad as it is, just knowing what I know about Hollywood, it probably is like a condo developer. Unfortunately,
probably.
I hope that they can at least save the 2 bungalows, the library and the theater. I think those at least should be a heritage site because they're original bungalows. The rest of the buildings, I doubt it.
Yeah,
we'll see.
They have to go.
Yeah, they do. They're gonna go.
All right, guys, if you love Hollyweird Paranormal, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hollyweird Paranormal. And also, if you have any scary ghost stories you wish to share for our listeners' tales, or any questions, or you want to say what's up, you can always email us at hollyweirdparanormal@gmail.com. We're also on X at HWP Podcast. We'll be taking a little bit of just like a 2-week break. I will be traveling. If you also have a few moments, please rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Please give us a 4-star rating, 5-star rating. It really does help us become a little more visible, of course. And also, if you have a little more time, you can be a Patreon member for as little as $1 or more per month. You can also partake in a lot of the video interviews and also our secret podcast society of Saturday Night Ghost Club. We have a bunch of amazing episodes of people sharing their true ghost stories. So you'll get that extra incentive right there. And you can follow that on www.patreon.com/Hollyweird Paranormal or stalk us on our website, which is hollyweirdparanormal.com. All right.
Yes.
Brice, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you. It was very fun.
Yes, it was. And we love your rants forever and always. We always get emails about them. We're like, yes, rant on, Brice.
I try not to. So
always remember to stay safe, stay well, stay Hollyweird. Of course, Brice, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Bye.